Okay, got it. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to How to Stay in Your Heart in a World of Psychological Warfare. Well, that's a mouthful, isn't it? I'm Dr. Stu Bittman, and this is my good friend. You can
And I'm,
introduce
Nic-
yourself.
I'm Nicole Bonner.
And if you missed the first episode, we'll certainly fill you in on how to find that at some point. But this is the second in 6 episodes of this podcast where we're exploring how to rise above the manipulation and fear that's prevalent in the world today so we can serve and be lights in this world, and how we can use chiropractic principles in order to do that. So Nicole, why don't you fill them in on kind of where we're at this point?
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I'm super excited to be here. And 2 weeks ago, we started this journey, Stu. And I think we had a blast doing it. We were really talking about what's been happening in the world over the course of the last 2 years, and specifically what's been happening in our profession and some of the challenges and the road bumps that we've had to I want to say jump over, but for some of them, they're more like a climb over. And so last time where we left off, we were talking about how during some of my moments where lots of questions arise and where I felt like I was having to go over way more than a speed bump. So there were days that I thought it looked like I had mountains in front of me to climb. And what it was I turned to the 33 chiropractic principles as a foundation to create even more certainty and conviction. And every answer that I seeked, patients, they came in with so many different questions. And so every time I had a question of how do I speak to a patient, or do I go right or do I go left, it always came back to the answers were in the principles. So that became a real grounding for me and a foundation that I was able to lean on through this time.
Mm.
And so that's kind of where we left off with our last episode. So if it's okay with you, I thought maybe we can start with principle number 1. What do you think?
It sort of makes sense. Let's start from the very beginning. A very good place to start, I hear.
Awesome. Well, you know what? This is one of my favorite principles, but I say that all the time, actually. I'm like, oh, this is my favorite one. And then it changes the next day.
The
But
one we're talking about is the favorite one.
it's the favorite
Yeah.
one, and it's the foundation for everything. It's the major premise. So it's that there's a universal intelligence in all matter, and it continuously gives to it all of its properties and actions, and that's maintaining it in its existence, right? So that's our basic foundational principle of chiropractic.
Yes, indeed. Yes, and
And
another mouthful.
yeah, that is a mouthful. And I think,
Uh-huh.
we'll probably be kind of picking that apart today. But, well, one of my favorite, mentors, or somebody that I follow, is Eckhart Tolle. And he said, we are not just in the universe, but we are the universe. So he explains that as, us being a focal point of, divinity, where, of the divine, so that God can have a conscious, expression here on earth. And, that's super fascinating, because when you think about that, you think, most of the time, and I know for myself anyway, I think of myself as like having boundaries, and I have skin, and that separates me from another person. And that puts me in a place that we call the universe. And really it's quite the opposite. The energy, the life is within us. That's who we are
And what we are.
and
Yes.
what we are.
And I love that there is a universal intelligence in all matter. It doesn't say there's a different universal intelligence in you, as opposed to me, or a rose, or a beaver, or a rock, or whatever. There is a universal intelligence. So it makes a lot of sense that same intelligence is us, is we're in it and it's in us, and all these words become difficult and stumbling blocks because whatever we can say about it, that wouldn't be it. But words can definitely point us in the right direction, hopefully. So yes, that's an incredibly comforting idea, and I think the basis of your certainty and your ability to answer questions, and not only that, to stay out of tremendous levels of fear, because yes, it's what I hear in that is it's beautifully designed, it's a harmoniously created and maintained, and we could probably disagree about what exactly is doing that, but there is something, and if we can acknowledge that, my gosh, then jumping ahead, unfortunately, in principles, but it's hard not to. The only problem is when there's interference to that,
Right.
And as chiropractors, that becomes our only mission, to remove that interference. And so how does that relate to staying out of the psychological warfare for you? How did that look?
Well, gosh, it looked so different all the time. It was dynamic and it was constantly changing, but for me, it kept me in my lane. It gave me, I don't like to usually talk in terms of boundaries, but in this case, keeping a strong boundary of and a clear vision and communication of who I am as a chiropractor and what we do. And also, one of the things that I just feels like I have to say this because I feel like it's like God's tapping on my shoulder with this. But you had mentioned, a universal intelligence. It's one universal intelligence within all. And I think that is important, not only, that's important all the time, but especially now, and even more so that I feel like we're kind of getting out of this pandemic, Stu, and we're going into a whole nother, like we just went from pandemic to war.
Yeah,
right?
A different symptom of the same issue.
A different symptom of essentially what chiropractors call subluxation, a disconnect.
Right.
Right. So when we're all connected, we're not only connected individually to source, but we're also connected to one another. And so now that eliminates the vocabulary of separation. And now really what it is understanding unity. Because I think if our world leaders understood these concepts, what we're talking about today, there wouldn't be war, it just wouldn't exist. What would the world be like if everybody knew that we were all one, that we're really all, one spirit, having different human experiences while we're here in the physical plane of the planet.
You mean instead of just using that as a catchphrase, that we're all in this together? Yeah, well, I believe that would make a difference. That's sort of the mission of my entire life, to help it, maintain or bring that vision to life. And you know what? It's not like we haven't all experienced that, because I know 6 months ago or so now we had terrible wildfire here that threatened to burn Lake Tahoe. Not the lake itself, that would be hard to burn, but the stuff around it, including my home. And so we evacuated the whole town, 35,000 people or something evacuated. And this has happened before in 2007, not to that degree. Fewer of us had to evacuate, but what I observe in times like that is, we know we're one. We know we're all in this together, and nobody gives a crap about their different opinions that they were fighting about the day before, and they they're helping each other and feeding each other and clothing each other and housing each other and transporting each other. And why because again, most of the time we're walking around with a lot of interference to knowing that. right? And it gets stripped away at times, like evacuations. And I have always said I wish there were more good things in life that gave us that same perspective. There certainly are, like if you've ever had a child, seeing it for the first time or holding it ever, even today when my daughter's 33, seeing her gives me that same feeling, going to the ocean, being in nature, so we are capable of this, I think, is what I'm trying to say. We are capable of not only understanding unity, but knowing it, feeling it, embodying it, living. And sure, who would be thinking about war at times like that, right? It would, that's a head job,
Yeah.
isn't it? Yes, that's a separation thing. That's yeah. And maybe that can segue into, so how did that principle particularly help you deal with your own feelings about what was going on?
Well, it just reminded me. It just reminded me of the power that of within. And for me, that was empowering. And you can't be in two places at one time. You can't be in love and empowered and also in fear and in hate. It's just
Right.
you can't be at two places at one time. And so, like, for me, it was like the light that drowned out the darkness.
Nice.
And it was a discipline, just like, for me, shoot, man, I'm not as disciplined as a lot of my other colleagues and friends that are chiropractors, so it was a discipline for me to, get up extra early or take time out of my busy task driven life and the schedule that we keep to take the time and get back into the principles, meditate on it, embody it. And that's where, I want to, you have a huge gift to bring to this podcast with some of the work you've been doing with heart math. And I'm going to have you explain what that is in a minute. But I think, for us for humanity, not just chiropractors, but humans in general, like, the key is not just like reading the principle, but taking the principle from here to here. Because those are two very different things.
Absolutely.
And that takes time, and that takes discipline. Well, I don't know for everybody, but for me, that took discipline to take my knowledge of the words that were on the paper and embody it, like immerse it into my body, feel it in my body. That makes sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's always the trick. Yeah, the things we understand maybe intellectually, but to get them in deeper. So that's a beautiful segue into heart math. But maybe before that, I just have a question. Did you find during the most difficult times that you were judging yourself for your feelings, like your own feelings? Like, especially if they weren't, spiritual or according to chiropractic principle? So I think it's important for people to know that they may not have been the only ones who did that. And it also relates to what we're going to talk about. So, was that your experience?
Yeah, all the time. All the time, it was like my motto to myself for the last year was, it's okay. And I had to adopt that motto, Stu, because, like, I would get these feelings of like frustration and anger of what was happening. And just like, even when the shot came out and patients were still getting the shot after, like, very intelligent people that knew better, that like these were like people that were coming in the beginning of this saying, I'm never going to get that shot. And then somehow getting, psychologically sideswiped, and they're coming in and they're getting injured. And it's like, I told you so. Like, that was my first human experience, to be totally transparent. It was like, I told you so. And now I'm really freaking aggravated that you didn't listen, because now you're injured. And, like, so then I go through like anger and aggravation, and then I feel freaking guilty. Talk about resonating at like a low level of consciousness.
Yeah, I mean, anger is a little higher vibration than fear, but But anyway, yes, yes. And so the first principle, uh, or especially Eckhart Tolle's take on it, would seem to indicate that those feelings are, part of our experience here, and are indeed okay, and maybe even more than okay. And so, the work for me was to realize that when I was triggered like that, when I was judging myself for judging and all those kind of things, what I needed was compassion. What I needed was like or empathy, encouragement, all this kind of stuff that I was, upset the world wasn't providing for me, but that I could always give to myself. So um, we could segue into heart math now if you'd like, because the reason I did that is I realized that when I'm in judgment, especially of my own judgments, and blame and anger and frustration and despair and overwhelm, I know for sure that I'm in my head.
Mhm.
I am in my head, and my head is flying solo. And that's where heart math comes in, because heart math, by the way, is a research institute from California. It's been around for a while, and the heartmath.org. Feel free to look into their stuff. It's amazing. They've done a lot of research on the heart, and it's a reason that a lot of chiropractors are doing work with heart rate variability right now, is because what they have discovered is, and this also explains our title, how to stay in the heart in a world of psychological warfare, which begs the question why you might want to be in your heart to begin with. Because when you're in your heart, quote unquote, you're a lot smarter. Your brain works better. What the most exciting thing to me that heart math has discovered is that there's way more nerve information going from the heart to the brain than from the brain to the heart. And this might counter principle 33, but it's going to be a long time before we get to that one. So it's okay. But I know in chiropractic, we talk about brain to body. And of course, that is a big part of how it works. But when our heart, so the information going from the heart to the brain is about the emotional state of the body. I'll do this really quick. The only information going from the brain to the heart is heart rate and stroke volume. That's the
Okay.
only influence the brain has on the heart, but the heart is informing the brain in every millisecond of everything that's going on in the body, our state of ease versus dis-ease. So when we are in a state of coherence, as heart math calls it, which could be called a state of ease in chiropractic, when we are in a state, in other words, of gratitude or love or joy, or at least compassion for self, or understanding or appreciation, then the information that's going from our heart to our brain reaches the higher centers of our brain, where we can actually remember our intentions and our values and our beliefs. And this is why it's so helpful to be able to engage our heart in that kind of emotional state, because right away we've risen above. Right away, we've actually moved from our reptile brain to our cerebral cortex, and have moved 1,000,000 years on the evolutionary scale, like this. So when we are in a state of any of those things I mentioned before, judgment, separation, guilt, blame, fear, anger,
Mhm.
the nerve information from our heart only reaches our brainstem, only reaches and our limbic system a bit, so we can experience emotion, but it's all based on memory, it's all based on the past, it's all based on survival, and when we're in
Mhm.
survival, of course we're going to separate, of course we're going to forget unity, of course we're going to forget everything we believe. It really
Mhm.
explains a lot about all the people, including myself, that at times forgot everything I believed 2 years ago plus,
Mhm.
right? So heart math's about tools that help us engage the heart in those emotional states. But you know what? Everybody knows how to engage those emotional states. I think we all remember joy. Wasn't that one
Mhm.
of the weirdest things about the whole thing, is like we started feeling guilty about experiencing joy? Like, oh, there's so much suffering, there's, people or whatever, then it's not right for me to experience joy or love or compassion for myself. I mean, that is again a head thing.
Right.
So that's a very quick background. There's a lot of exciting work that they've done. And the only thing other thing I'll say right now is that for years and years and years, I heard stuff about this. I've been on this spiritual journey. And by the way, I suggest, Nicole, that you switch from discipline to blissipline.
Ah,
It made a world of difference for me. I hated that word discipline. It reminded me of push-ups, you know.
me too.
Yeah, so blissipline, because everything heart math teachers, everything we're going to share here, everything you probably know already that opens your heart is a very joyful, fun thing to do. It's not horrible. It's not push-ups. It's not drills. It's not, I mean, some people like that stuff too, but that's your problem. Anyway, uh, so I was going to say something else. Yeah. So for years I heard, go to your heart, be in your heart, live in your heart. And essentially what heart math teaches us, that's literally true. Just putting our attention in the area of our heart, just identifying ourselves more in this area than in this area. Just like having a feeling and not going right up here with it and using this to blame or separate or justify or get angry about, but just to feel it, just to hold it. And we find out that our heart is just incredibly resilient. It's the most resilient organ in our body by far. Our brain is not. Our brain can't handle somebody parting their hair on the other side than we're used to,
Mhm.
you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know, Stu, I think this conversation that we're having today is essential for humanity because there is so much separation. Like the separation that I see, it breaks my heart. Say words have meanings and words have power. Like it hurts my heart what I see.
Yes. Well, absolutely. And that's a feeling. That's a very valid feeling. And you're right, because just as in chiropractic, we know we're not creating health in people. We're not, that's already there. We're just removing interference. So what we're leading into here is that we all have some work to do, some discipline work to do to remove that kind of separation in our own consciousness. And that's, I think what you experienced when you were indeed feeling okay is because you got your heart in line or aligned with your brain and saw a bigger picture or more hope. So yes, I agree with you. This is a fundamental subluxation in humanity, and that we all have the seeds of that. And we're not blaming anybody, we're not judging anybody. We may be at different points in the spectrum on this journey of aligning or of moving the 18 inches from head to heart, but we're all on that journey somewhere. And so,
Right.
cool.
Well, that goes back to a little bit about what we were discussing earlier with Eckhart Tolle's perspective as well, and that is that you know we're all spirits that are here in the physical plane having human experiences and feeling human emotions. And he says that that is that we're actually meant to feel those emotions. So when we look at it, and that is the focal point of divinity, having consciousness of those emotions. So when we look at it from that perspective, that helps us to remove judgment of when we're not in our heart. There is no judgment. And people always say you're your own worst critic, right? We're probably the hardest on ourselves than even other people. But that's why my slogan's been "It's okay," because there's absolutely no judgment. In fact, you're meant as a human to have these feelings and have these experiences and have these emotions. But I think we're also meant as spiritual being as spirits to I don't know if I want to say the word evolve, because like the spirit is already evolved.
Evolve in
you
our
know,
awareness of that, of all the things you're saying, in
yeah,
our understanding and awareness. Yes, that's the
that's
old.
it.
That's where all. That's see. That's exactly it. That's where all the work always needs to be done. Because just again, it's just like chiropractic, isn't it? It is. It's already there, right?
Yeah, it's already
Yeah.
there.
Yeah,
It's
it's
already
already
there.
evolved, and when
Mhm.
people say, I want to be more spiritual, I say, you can't be more spiritual. You're a spirit. Again, you could have
Yeah,
probably a little more awareness or identification with that part
exactly.
of you, which is not really a part of you, but but again, words get interesting. But
Yeah.
yes, and at some point I realized that they call them feelings. Apparently, we're supposed to feel them. At that point in my life, though, I don't know if I ever really felt one. I mean, I would feel it. I would
Mm-hmm.
feel it, but then I would instantly, again, make it a mental gymnastics thing.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I feeling it? Who can I blame? Um, instead of feeling it. And
Mm-hmm.
and that wasn't my fault. Our entire culture is thinking based. I mean, did your third grade teacher, other than if you maybe just threw up or something, ever ask you how you felt about anything? We don't learn to
Right,
communicate on the basis of our feelings. We don't
right.
learn to, most of us learn to feel guilty about our feelings, or we're
Yep.
told we shouldn't have feelings. Stop being sad. you know be a man.
Mhm.
So it's not anybody's fault. Again, we're not judging, but
Mhm.
it's very freeing and enlightening to actually start living according to that first principle and be okay with feeling, because again, we don't break. We
Yeah.
break more from the thinking we do about the feelings, and then all the stuff we make it mean. And feelings come and go. They are
Mhm.
part of the experience, but we keep them around. I mean, I can be angry with somebody for 30 years, but it's not one angry thought. It's like 30 years of angry thoughts
Yeah.
that I could jump in at any time, especially if I engage my heart and break the cycle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh, man, this is exciting. This is fun.
It is. So how can, well, let's start with chiropractors, but this is really for everybody. This is for humanity. But how can chiropractors use heart math
So look into it.
to
The basic tool is just to focus on the heart. Um, so most of the tools start with putting your attention on your heart, and you can do this with eyes open or eyes closed. In fact, they're recommending a lot more work with your eyes open, because I don't know if you've experienced meditating, and then 30 seconds after meditation, again, somebody parts their hair on the wrong side, and it kind of ruins your whole day. That has happened to me. So for a lot of us, there's a bit of a separation between our meditation time and our life. So opening our eyes blurs that, but it's just about
Mm.
breathing in and out of our heart. And we can go into this in more detail another time, but that would be a good place to start. Just practice stopping and taking a breath into, like, visualize you're actually breathing into your heart, and imagine you're breathing out of your heart, and just do that for a few moments, and notice if that doesn't bring you some more peace or some more objectivity or some space or some ease. you know
Mhm.
the rest of the tools essentially involve evoking a feeling that we've talked about. So they used to teach to think of somebody or something that brings you unconditional joy, or that you unconditionally love. Pets, by the way, work
Mm.
better than people for some reason, because we always seem to have something, some yeah, but about people, but or babies and pets. So think about that, or something else, or an activity that, again, gives you joy, or that you appreciate, or that a caring thought, and then just breathe that feeling in and out of your heart. If you want to add that element right now, that would be most of it. That's they have a lot of specific tools for specific things, but that is the basic tool to be in your heart, to actually put your attention there. And that's something you can do for 20 minutes as your meditation. That's something you can do for a minute and then repeat it throughout the day. That's something you can do every time you have a triggering thought. that's something you can do before something you know is going to be stressful, or that might, otherwise or historically send you out of your heart. So there's a lot of uses for it. And but the discipline is actually using it.
Yeah, I was just thinking, it's essential before laying hands on patients.
It's a magnificent thing to do before every adjustment. Yeah, it's just, for me, it was critical between, for every adjustment, because the last thing I wanted to do was to be in my head, especially thinking about the last person that I adjusted, or the next person that I was supposed to adjust, or what I was going to be doing later, or the little spat I had with my wife in the morning, or not that ever happened, but those kind of things. So yes, to have a tool. This addresses a very common question in chiropractic, right? How do I stay present? How do I stay, how do I stay focused? How do I stay motivated? Fortunately, it's the same question as how to stay in your heart in psychological warfare. It's by engaging our heart. Yeah.
Yeah. I think about practices that say they go through, 5 or 10 or 15 years of practicing. And sometimes I'll hear chiropractors say, well, I've never seen like a chiropractic miracle. Do you believe that that's the difference between chiros that see them daily in their practices and maybe people that go their whole career without seeing that?
I definitely think that is a factor, and perhaps a major factor. I think another factor is, what your expectations are, or maybe I'll put it the other way, what your limits are as far as what you believe is possible in chiropractic, because I think our own limits definitely affect what could happen with people. Either way, I guess energetically it's a similar thing. It's still, if we have limiting expectations of what's possible, obviously, what organ we're in, because our heart doesn't really know about the limits. Our heart, can't spell limits. And our brain only knows limits. But again, that's what it's designed to do. It's designed to compare and contrast and keep us around in case there's danger and stuff. But unfortunately, those are not the same parts of our brain as the ones that remember unity and love and can keep us out of fear. So I do believe that's a big factor, because the schools scare us out of thinking that a miracle is ever possible, except maybe not referring somebody. That's about the biggest miracle I learned could happen in school, that I could actually care for somebody. They had a condition that was okay for me to take care of.
Right.
Yeah.
I wish they were teaching this
I'm
stuff.
sorry, but I have to say this, on the first Panama mission, we saw miracles left and right, and none of us had. So on the first mission, your friend Anita, Milan, I hope that's okay, Anita. This is a good story. I could tell him other stories that you might not want me to tell, but she adjusted a young boy, I think, in this huge special school, and his hearing was restored. I think it was a her, now that I say that story. But either way, there were 18 of us on that first mission, and the only one who had ever had that happen in his practice was Sigafus. So that told me right away that there's probably something related to vision or presence, or because we started to see that left and right. And the huge difference in Panama was we had to be in our hearts, because we had nothing for our heads to chew on. We didn't know what was wrong with people. We didn't have to worry about convincing them to be adjusted. We weren't worrying about justifying our fee because we weren't getting paid. We were in our hearts, and talk about unity. It was like even though I adjusted 2,000 people one day in Panama, it was like one person with 4,000 different beautiful eyes. It was spirit. It was innate, walking in over and over and over again in different earth suits, and that was all. That was all there was, and that why. And yeah, so to take it to the extreme of what you're saying, if we can remove the subluxations from what normally what is always available to us, which is again unlimited insight and unlimited power.
Mhm.
Maybe not unlimited power, but you know what I mean. A lot more than we tend to think we have, and the unlimited power within that person. Because again, and there was no doubt in my mind in those moments when I was adjusting people, there was nothing in my mind in those moments when I was
Right.
adjusting people, but certainly nothing like limitations. So they were a spirit in an earth suit, and I was helping that earth suit not interfere with the expression of bigness and love and goodness and all the things I knew were in there. And that's that as chiropractors, that's what we have a chance to do every day. But
Yeah.
we have to get our hearts engaged. We that to me, the subluxations between the heart and the head are what limit us, what make us just as much as part of the problem as the people we tend to judge,
Hmm.
that get us into anger and judgment, even with ourselves,
Yeah.
and that keep us from being the incredible light and influence on this world that we can always could have been and still can be and still are.
Wow, I love it.
Yeah, that sounded like a closing remark to me.
It did to me too. And I think we're right at that 30-minute. I know we were shooting for 33. I'm not sure if we're hitting it, but
We're
that was
probably pretty close.
beautiful. That was
Yeah, that was
beautiful.
beautiful. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
It's a beautiful opportunity to share with everybody, and especially with you.
Oh, thank you,
So,
Stu.
because especially right now, since you're the only one I'm seeing. But
Well, that's awesome. And shoot, man, I'm just honored to be doing this with you every 2 weeks. I look forward to
can't
it.
wait for the next one. April 15th, everybody's favorite day.
Yes.
How many of you went right to your head in a place of lack when I said that? Don't answer that question. It's all right. As Sigafus always said, the answer to any tax problems is to make more money. So
I love
not only will you get spiritual insights on this podcast, but financial advice as well.
it. We could do
All right.
that, you know.
Yeah, oh sure.
All right, everybody. So we will see you in 2 weeks. Many blessings. And my prayer is that this just provided value for you. We love you to death.
The best 2 weeks ever.
Yep.
All right.